America's Mayor live. And tonight we're going to reveal just a little bit of the evidence that we have, and the evidence that goes back to prehistoric time. It goes back to before, let's say, before the hard drive, because you have no reason to remember this, but I do have it documented. My first 10 podcasts, 8 of them were devoted to the case, the bribery case of Joe Biden. And we didn't have the hard drive at that point. The FBI was concealing it, and Attorney General Barr was concealing it, and Ray was concealing it. They had it, but they didn't make it available to anyone. Even when the allegations were made to defraud the American people with regard to the election of 2020, even in spite of that, Ray and Barr concealed the hard drive. And we didn't find out about it until October, or was it September of 2020, with just a few weeks to go in the election. But way before that, way back in February of 2019, I began revealing the entire bribery scheme, that the purpose of the payments to Hunter Biden was certainly not for Zlochevsky to be paying millions and millions of dollars to a habitual drug addict, but in order to get the influence of Joe Biden to save his company, to save Zlochevsky's company. And that at the right time, Biden came in and, in fact, did save the company by having Poroshenko, the president of Ukraine, remove Shokin from office and replace him with a gentleman named Lutsenko, who, under Lutsenko, the Burisma case was dismissed. It took a while, but it was dismissed. And it took a while to appoint Lutsenko because Lutsenko wasn't a lawyer. He was selected, get this, with the assent of Joe Biden. Poroshenko actually called Biden to get his approval of the choice that he made, and basically said he was somebody on our side, meaning he was somebody who would dismiss the case and make it go away, even though it basically defrauded the Ukrainian people of the $40 million that Zlochevsky walked away with. Now, think about this for a moment and see if this question doesn't emerge, and let's figure out how corrupt, unfortunately, our government is, and theirs. We have talked about now. I'll count it up at some point, maybe during the break. I'll count up the number of the pieces of evidence that prove that Joe Biden was involved in a bribery scheme in Ukraine. The most recent evidence was the FD 1023, the FBI report from a very highly reliable informant. So there's no reason not to believe that for the purpose of moving forward with an investigation. It certainly would supply probable cause that a crime was committed. It usually is a reliable informant that does it. It's just the opposite of the Pfizer warrant that was based on an unreliable informant who was a liar and actually got fired by the FBI, but they didn't bother to tell the judge that. So the reality is, whether people want to face it or not, we have a mountain of evidence that this current president of the United States, major. The evidence is not even questionable any longer. I was prepared and recommended that he get prosecuted 2.5 years ago for this. The evidence was there before you had the hard drive and before you had the 1023. It was there with the testimony of Shokin, which we'll show you a little of tonight. And then over the next 3 or 4 days, we're going to open our files and show you more and more of this so that you get a sense of what kind of case, what kind of case this is. So, but let's go. See, I started off talking about the more important situation, and that is the mounting evidence of an overwhelming nature regarding, well, you have to describe it as Joe Biden's lifetime of selling his influence, or otherwise known as the crime of bribery. That is a very well recognized crime. It's existed in American and English law for centuries, and everyone can recognize it as a crime. One would call it mala in se. Mala in se is a Latin phrase for wrong in and of itself, as opposed to mala prohibita, which is things that are made wrong by rules and regulations. So, for example, one would say that let's say the indictment involving the classified or not classified documents. Those are rules and regulations that are set up that aren't universally intuitive. I mean, you wouldn't know exactly what you could take and not take, whether a president could or couldn't. In fact, they've changed those rules, or who makes the final call on whether it's a presidential personal record or a government record. That's all mala prohibita. Those are rules that you have to learn and know. And since they are all rules that are imposed by the legislature or by regulatory bodies, you really aren't going to comply with those as naturally, and it's not as sinister or as damaging when you don't, because a lot of those rules you might not know, or might not know them in great detail, or there might be dispute about how they apply, whereas everybody knows that murder is a crime. Many people don't know that if you don't do something on a certain date, that may be a crime. You've got to learn that. Or that there may be, I would imagine most senators know that you can't take classified documents out of the SCIF. But that is a rule. I mean, it could be organized so that senators could take those documents home. It isn't, but so the point that I'm making is, in all of this morass of cases, the ones involving Biden, the ones involving Trump, and the ones involving Pence, I have to believe every president has had this problem, and Biden can't be the first senator to take classified documents home. Pence certainly isn't the first vice president to do it, but Biden did it. Here's the problem where Biden stands out, though. None of those people were getting money from China, as far as we know. Well, I have a lot of problems with Pence right now based on what he said, and we're going to focus on that because I think it's outrageous what he's done. And he's kind of tipped the scales. If you were one of these people that lionized him and made him into a great hero, he might now go in the skunk category, and someone whose ambition overcomes his judgment. But I don't think he ever got bribes. Certainly there's no evidence of that, and he doesn't seem like the kind of person that would. And I'll tell you the truth, Biden didn't either. I thought of Biden, having known him for 30 to 35 years, I thought of him as a major dope, really stupid, but honest, basically financially honest. Not honest in the sense of telling the truth. He had a real problem with that. He's almost a constant liar. It's almost impossible to know when he's telling the truth or not. You can actually follow the rule. Whenever he's making himself heroic in some way, he's almost always lying. It's got to be some kind of complex that he's got or some kind of insecurity that he's got. But you think about it all throughout the years, I was first in my class. No, he was close to last. I have 5 degrees. No, he has 2. I've got the highest. I have a higher IQ than you. I don't think there are too many people that have a lower IQ than Joe Biden. You almost all beat him. That kind of thing. Or, you know, I gave out a medal on the battlefield, and the man refused it. In fact, the medal to that man was given in Washington, and it was given by Obama, and he stood next to Obama. He didn't even give him the medal, much less do something heroic like be on the battlefield. You just see that throughout. I guess maybe because he's passed off as charming, and he sure isn't, but maybe all of us fail to make the connection between a guy who cheated in law school, a guy that cheated in law school and plagiarized in law school to overcome his failing out the first year. Probably is fundamentally a dishonorable, dishonest man. But it would have been hard to assume this level of dishonesty. After all, I think it's pretty safe to say that no American president has ever been alleged, even, much less proven, to have taken this many bribes at such a incredibly obscene amount of money, and then bribes that move over into the category of almost treason because they come from our enemies or our adversaries or those who wish us ill. The money from Russia and the money from China, for sure. And even the money from Ukraine compromises him in the present situation. I mean, there's a dispute about the Ukraine war in the sense that is it going to go on forever? How much more are we going to fund? If they fail, now to make any material dent in the Russian possession of their country, is it just going to go on forever? And we're going to constantly give them billions and billions of dollars. And finally, there's been no accounting at all of how much of it was actually used for guns. And you become very suspicious because it is a very corrupt country. No one ever resolved the $5 billion that was outstanding in foreign aid in 2017. And we'll play that for you too, as we do a review of the evidence that existed before the hard drive that really required prosecuting Biden. And if we had an honest Justice Department or Attorney General or an honest FBI, we would have. And he'd have been convicted because the evidence is overwhelming. So instead of concentrating on that, which is of serious import to our country, we're forced to concentrate on this ridiculous indictment for not for a crime, but for exercising First Amendment rights. Now, let's review. I'm going to put this on here. Ted, you got those there? Yeah. I'm going to put that. I'd like people to look at. Let's review where we stand here on these charges, and let's see if any of them really. I mean, I don't know how to tell you this, ladies and gentlemen. These are not crimes. These are thoughts and statements that are protected by something called the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. You have a right to have the opinion that the election was stolen from you. And I'm going to show you why. I'm going to give you a little support for that. But here are the charges: conspiracy to defraud the United States. This statute has been seriously questioned by the United States Supreme Court. I believe one of Jack Smith's cases under this statute was reversed with the court reversing an 8-0 because it was much too vague. If that was vague, this is even more vague, since it's the conspiracy is made up of statements that Trump and his lawyers made, all covered by for both of them, Trump and the lawyers, the First Amendment to the United States Constitution, the right of free speech, and in the case of the lawyers, covered by the attorney-client relationship. Jack Smith doesn't seem to remember that the role of a defense lawyer is to interpret the existing evidence in the light most favorable to your client. So if there's a report that a certain number of ballots were from dead people, and there's a report to the opposite, and you can't resolve it, the whole purpose is to put your evidence forward, and then the court resolves it. That's what the hearing is for. That would mean that every time the government had a document that contradicted the evidence of the defendant, that the lawyer propounding that would be considered to have acted illegally or criminally. You couldn't defend your client if that was the case. Necessarily, you're going to raise things that the other side has evidence to the contrary, and then it's got to get balanced by the court. So, I mean, there are even opinions of courts saying that in election cases in particular, there's going to be more error because it happens very, very quickly. It has to be based on expert testimony because all the records aren't available until much, much later. And there can be more mistakes. But the mistakes on the case of a lawyer, the mistakes have to be clearly based on giving your client the benefit of the doubt. So it is very, very suspicious that all of the co-conspirators are his lawyers. So what they've done is they've indicted him for exercising his First Amendment right of free speech, and they've included the co-conspirators and penalized them sort of, or made very, very nasty allegations about them based on their doing their job as lawyers. I would say that's been a consistent theme of the Bidenistas and the Hillary Clinton people going back to the beginning of this investigation, because this is just an extension of the Russian collusion fraud. This is not just a fraud. This is a straight out violation of the First Amendment in a way that I've never seen before. I mean, the conspiracy to defraud the United States, and the charge too is just these are all just 4 different ways of saying the same thing. Charge number 2 is conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding. I don't know who he conspired with to do that. I was there. Nobody did. And it wasn't to obstruct it. It was to comply with it and comply with the rules of it, to lay out the objections. And if there was a senator and a congressman that signed on to the objections, then there'd be a debate and a decision and a discussion. It was to take advantage of the legal rights we have, except we didn't know that Donald Trump doesn't have legal rights. See, nobody had told us that. We thought we were operating under the same rules, which was kind of naive. We should have known by then that we were in something more similar to a Soviet, Chinese, Iranian, or Nazi court. The third charge is obstruction of, this is really, even the title is ridiculous. Obstruction of an attempt to obstruct an official proceeding. So, what's the difference between that and the one before it? Conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding. The difference is that phony Jack Smith wants to make it look worse. So you can end up with saying, 20, 40, 50, 55 years. This is great. Biden takes $31 million from China. Yeah, I've even been investigated for it. Trump takes no money from anyone, and they want to put him in jail for 45 years. You see something wrong with that? I hope you do, because like me, you're an American, and you have a sense of fairness. And the final one is totally nuts for a statute that almost never used, and it usually requires injury to bring the case. But here's the really odd thing about charge number 4: conspiracy against rights. Whose rights? The only rights that there was a conspiracy against were Donald Trump's. This one, I don't know if you see it there, right there. This one here. This one, they should be charged with that.
Can you hold it up for Getter?
Oh, sure. They should be charged with this conspiracy against rights. I mean, we can make it real specific. This is they are engaged in a conspiracy to deprive him of his First and Sixth Amendment rights. First Amendment right of free speech, which means he can have a controversial opinion about the election. And number 2, and he doesn't even necessarily have to be right about it, I mean, if he's telling the truth, if you take these as some kind of charge, and this is based on a good faith basis, then he's not guilty. But I don't think this is even a charge. I think even if everything in the indictment is true, and it's not, I can go chapter and verse about how they lied in this indictment. But even if it's true, he was entitled to say it or do it. And his lawyers were entitled to make arguments based on reports they had that they would have been unethical in their duty to their client if they just threw the reports away. I'll show you some of them in a little while. So, conspiracy against rights, I would say the chief defendant there. Well, assuming that Joe Biden is running this, is Joe Biden, but certainly Merrick Garland and his hitman would have to be right on the top of the list in that one. So those are the charges, and I don't know how to. I'm going to just show you one state. I went. In between my radio show and this show, I went into my files. I'm going to tell you, I've got 300 affidavits and statements in Pennsylvania alone. And I've got somewhere between 100 and 300 in every other state involved. But here's something quite impressive. And I don't understand how you can say he didn't have a basis or his lawyers didn't have a basis when I'm holding a report here that was done by the Standing Senate Judiciary Committee of the Georgia legislature. And they list circumstance after circumstance of fraud. In fact, in the executive summary, the first sentence is the November 3, 2020 general election was chaotic, and any report or results must be viewed as untrustworthy. Totally the opposite of the anti-Trumper, well before the election, Attorney General Raffensperger, who pronounced that the election was perfect. Chaotic, and any reported results must be viewed as untrustworthy. The subcommittee heard evidence that proper protocols were not used to ensure chain of custody of the ballots. The subcommittee heard testimony that it was possible or even likely that large numbers of fraudulent ballots were introduced into the pool of ballots that were counted as voted. There's no way of tracing the ballots after they have been separated from the point of origin. The subcommittee heard testimony of pristine ballots whose origin looked suspicious, but which could not be verified, and the inability of poll workers to distinguish between test ballots and absentee ballots. Signatures were not consistently verified, according to law, in the absentee balloting process. Now, I mean, why isn't he entitled to base his opinion on this this senator's report. This is a reliable source. If they had it, they're saying he should have, instead of listening to the senator, he should have listened to the people in his Justice Department. Well, now we know the people in his Justice Department were crooked. They were hiding the hard drive. The people in his Justice Department had already participated in a conspiracy to defraud the American people with regard to this election by withholding the hard drive. And I have a personal resentment against him because Biden specifically said that I was a Russian pawn, and they had the evidence that I wasn't. They didn't care. Just like there's plenty of evidence that the allegations that are just thrown around about me now are totally false. They're just as false as they were then. Why do you think that Trump and I are the ones telling you the truth about Russian collusion? They're the big stinking liars, and all of a sudden, what, they changed? Now they become truth tellers. Poll watchers on election night testified that they had noted that ballots were not secured, that seals and security tags were not used, and the chain of custody was often lacked or non-existent. Similar patterns during the recount process. How about this? A great deal of testimony supported evidence of a coordinated effort to prevent a transparent process of observing the counting of ballots during the absentee ballot opening period and on election night. Now, that same process took place in 5 other cities, all of them Democrat strongholds and well known as corrupt cities. So I don't know. You want to play games and not admit that Philadelphia, Detroit, Milwaukee, Minneapolis, and Atlanta aren't Democrat controlled corrupt cities? The subcommittee did not have time to investigate the numerous publicly reported issues with the Dominion voting machines, but this state, and this is where maybe some confusion came about. This state, the way in which they defrauded in this state was through the paper ballots, and here's how you know it. They wouldn't allow our team or any of the teams representing the president to look at a single paper ballot, not one. And they did the same thing in the other cities. In Philadelphia, they counted like 700,000 ballots, and they didn't allow a Republican to look at any one of them. Just in Philadelphia. All these states have various laws requiring the ballots to be inspected, the absentee ballots to be inspected. In every one of the states, that was dramatically violated to the extent of putting up barriers to exclude Republicans. So I could read through other reports from other cities, but I'm going to use, I just happen to be able to put my hands on this report of Georgia, and this report is dated, this report, the testimony was on December 3rd, 2020, and then there was later testimony, but this report was put out in late December of 2020. So covers the period of time in which they're alleging that the president lied. Well, if he had this, how could he be lying? He has a right to believe this. I have a right to believe this. Just Bridget Thorne, who was a 9 years experience as a poll worker, was disturbed that the lack of ballot security. Test ballots were printed on the same type of paper as real ballots, but the test ballots were not routinely marked as such or destroyed. She saw a stack of these ballots held aside almost 8 inches tall. She also observed on October 30th, when early voting ended, 40 to 50 scanners being brought into the arena and tens of thousands of ballots being scanned in by random people pulling ballots from random places. No formal procedure. No chain of custody. When Thorne objected to this haphazard process, a Dominion employee replied, "It's fine. We've been doing this all week." When Thorne left that night, she observed unsecured suitcases of ballots next to the scanners. Then she attempted to report her concerns to the Secretary of State. She received no response. I mean, guess it wasn't so perfect a ballot, Raffensperger, you liar, huh? But why? I mean, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't I, as the lawyer for Donald Trump or any of the other lawyers, not credit this testimony? Well, I have no reason to believe that Bridget Thorne is lying. The way you're going to test it is with a hearing, and she gets cross-examined. They may think she's lying. They have a right to contest it, but they don't have a right. They're not the judge and the jury. They don't have the right to decide that I can't argue that she's telling the truth. Otherwise, I can't be a lawyer. Or that this doesn't constitute part of Trump's reasonable basis. Scott Hall of Fulton County, experienced poll watcher. There were, when he brought lunch for workers, they were not permitted to use the lunch area. The lunch area was being used to count ballots, yet tables were set up for counting. The poll watchers were excluded. He has photographs of the area. He also testified there were stacks and stacks of unsecured blank ballots that were in the open. Mr. Hall noticed the limitation of one monitor per 10 recounting tablets. They had no ability to see what was being done. And then there's the testimony of Susan Voiles, who got thrown out on November 15th. She was told at 10 that there was nothing else for them to do, so they should leave. Since she gave her testimony, she's been fired. Tony Burson, a Savannah, a military veteran, served as one of the very few observers. He described the process as disgusting. Stacks of ballots were being counted with no oversight or accountability. Nancy Kane of DeKalb reported that she was kept too far from the counting to be able to see anything. Now that you could find 100 witnesses in Pennsylvania, in Detroit, in Minneapolis, in Milwaukee, in Maricopa County, Arizona, or in Atlanta, Georgia, that would say the same thing. They would. This was a plan. It's impossible that on the day they were going to count votes, the Democratic leaders in each of those corrupt cities woke up and said, "We're going to get barriers and keep the Republicans out, and we're not going to let them see a damn piece of paper, because if they start seeing paper, they're going to see the phony papers that we slipped in." That's the only reason they would do that. You got to be an idiot not to figure that out. And it wasn't spontaneous in each one of the places. But the testimony I just read to you, sitting in that room there, I got about 100 in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia alone like that. Scott Hall of Fulton County was told to leave the World Congress Center after he tried to document and photograph 9 unsecured bags of ballots. He testified he cried over the incidents he saw. Dana Smith, the Republican poll watcher, said that she saw paper backup ballots being placed in unlocked canvas bags for transport to the election supervisor's office to be counted. These were backup ballots. Smith also testified that there was open access to the special paper used to print the paper ballot backup ballots. Hal Susie observed the process in 2 counties, Cobb and Fulton. At State Farm Arena in Fulton County, he reported suitcases full of ballots all over the place with no chain of custody, no time and no date. He saw people taking ballots out of the cases, counting and putting them right back into the cases. No one checked him in as a credentials observer. And one man handed him a stack of ballots without knowing who he was or where the ballots came from. How about this one? On November 14th, Susan Voiles, 20 years of experience, reviewed a stack of 110 absentee ballots. Then you usually in stacks of 100 and noticed they were pristine. They hadn't been folded. They didn't appear worn. Each ballot was bubbled in with exactly the same marking, which showed a small crescent of white in the bubble. It appeared as though one ballot had been marked and then reproduced 109 times. In addition, one of these ballots bore the distinctive ink markings that haven't been pulled from a printer too soon. Almost all of these ballots were votes for Vice President Biden. Only 2 were for President Trump. 108-2 ballots that were pristine. Now, they have to be phony ballots because an absentee ballot has to be folded, because the only way to identify the absentee ballot is with the envelope on the outside. Now, I can go on and on and on and read these to you. And the report concludes that you can't come to any conclusion about a valid number, and that each one of the recounts in Georgia was pretty phony because they just kept recounting the same questionable ballots. So every time they recounted, they still had the pristine ballots that were being counted. The ones that were phony, we don't know how many of them there were. So we've got how many more witnesses? I'd say 30, 40, and a report from a state senator, and not only a state senator, signed on to by the committee members, John Kennedy, Bill Heath, Blake Tillery, Michael Rett, and Elena Parent. And the conclusion is that the Georgia election was fraudulent. Now, how can you say that Donald Trump knew he was lying about, let's say, Georgia, when he has the support of this report that he has every right to credit, and I have every right to argue on his behalf, as well as the other lawyers involved.
So it's legitimate and a fair position to take to argue that the U.S. presidential election in 2020 was stolen.
Well, let's do yeah. Well, I get the other reports out too, but let's do it right now. It is certainly legitimate to argue that Georgia was stolen. Here's a Senate report that says that. Now, I don't know. Everybody can't do it. You'd have to do what they didn't do and have a trial and have these people testify. But the courts wouldn't allow anybody to testify. It almost seemed like they were afraid to have regular citizens get up and support this. So they left the impression that this was me or Trump or Eastman or somebody else who was making. I wasn't making any allegations on my own. The only thing I knew on my own was what I saw in Philadelphia when I was asked to go there. That's the only thing I mean, if I were called as a witness, that's the only, everything else. I mean, here's a little summary of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13.
I mean, look,
14, 15, looks to me about 20 different citizens of Georgia talking about fraudulent vote count of all different irregularities. In particular, this problem with the pristine ballots and the ballots that look like they had been printed and not submitted by voters, and then the ballots that look like they were just brought in and not secured and counted without anyone having an opportunity to observe them. One after the other, after the other. Now here's an expert. Mark Davis analyzed data from U.S. Postal Service change of address, compared it to voters who voted in their former precinct. For example, he discovered 14,980 out-of-state movers still voted in Georgia. They had moved to another place. Another 40,279 moved across county lines more than 30 days prior to the election. Yet they still voted in their county precincts, a violation of Georgia law. And then there are the other experts that testified. Findings: the election was chaotic. The Secretary of State, that's Ratzenberger, the one who was intimidated, must be kind of a weakling, huh? Gets intimidated easily. And the State Elections Board failed to enforce the law as written in the Georgia Code and created policies to contravene state law. We have heard evidence that state law wasn't followed time after time after time. Secretary of State failed to have a transparent process for the verification of signatures. This is all Ratzenberger, the hero of the left-wing press. Secretary instituted an unconstitutional gag order so that monitors were told not to use photography or video recording devices. Election officials at all levels failed to secure the test ballots that easily could be used and counted as real ballots. And this is the one involving the two women. The events at the State Farm Arena are particularly disturbing because they demonstrated intent on the part of election workers to exclude the public from viewing the counting of ballots, an intentional disregard for the law. The number of votes that could have been counted in that length of time was sufficient to change the results of the presidential election. Well, I mean, they shared the view of that film that Trump had and that our team had. So it wasn't just us who saw it that way. And if you look at it carefully, and they are very tricky about this in the indictment, they don't point out what was actually illegal about that. They say we didn't prove that they were phony ballots. No, that isn't the charge. They're illegal because they weren't inspected. And you can see on the video that the people that were there, the public that was there, was thrown out. And some of those people testified they were thrown out, and you see it on tape. The oral testimony of witnesses on December 3rd, 2020, and subsequently the written testimony submitted by many others provide ample evidence that the 2020 Georgia general election was so compromised by systematic irregularities and voter fraud that it should not be certified. That's the conclusion of a group of senators that held 2 days of hearings, and I think heard somewhere near either 100 witnesses or 100 pieces of evidence. Now, if they came to that conclusion and he had this report, and this is only one of many, there are similar ones in other states, then there's no way that he knowingly lied. He had every right to rely on this. And I had every right to argue it as valid because I am supposed to look at the evidence in the light most favorable to my client. Maybe these people never went to law school and don't know that. They sure as hell have been reversed often enough so it looks like they never went to law school. And they sure lied enough in the document and left significant things out. We're going to take a break in a minute, but I got to make one other point that is really disgusting. There's a big debate about whether this judge should recuse herself because she is known as, she was declared last year by the Associated Press as the toughest punisher of rioters in the 2020 insurrection, sending all defendants before her behind bars, many of them for more time than the prosecutor even asked for. She's used the word insurrection, I believe. But I mean, there was no proof of an insurrection. This was the only insurrection that ever took place, if it was an insurrection, without anybody having a gun. Exactly how were they going to accomplish this insurrection? With a pea shooter? Not only that, she's very politically involved. She's an anti-Trumper. She is certainly a biased individual, and she should recuse herself. And if she doesn't, the higher court should throw her off because there's one other thing. She worked for the law firm Boys Schiller that Hunter Biden worked for. Well, you say, okay, so what? That law firm represented Burisma, the major corrupter. The one and made income from that crooked company. And they helped that crooked company cover up their crimes. That's the law firm she came from. How is she going to be fair? She came from the law firm that represented Burisma. You can't make this stuff up. That is so damn unethical. It stinks, Judge. Her name is Chutkan. Judge Tanya Chutkan. I don't know if she's, she's supposed to recuse herself. If you come from the same law firm that represented the criminal defendant here, that paid, I don't know, $10 million in one shot and then $2 million a year for 4 or 5 years to the Bidens, you tell me how you're going to be fair. I mean, it was sort of the Biden law firm. Hunter worked with them. Hunter got them to represent Burisma, the crooked company. That's the law firm she comes from. Sorry, Judge, out. Rules apply to you too, even though Obama appointed you, and even though you're a Democrat, and even though you're in the District of Columbia. So let's take a break, and then we'll be right back. And
we'll start with QUX tonight, and then we'll be back. And of course, we will have another great announcement later in the show.
I need my. I need my stuff.
The year is 2022. Cancel culture is the new normal. Online freedom as we know it has ended. Digital stockades are here. All activity is monitored, stored, and predictively analyzed by a technological cartel. We're being converted into a digital resource, a digital currency to be farmed for metadata and loaded into a computerized combine, blockchained to a social engineering operating system. However, it doesn't have to be this way. Be part of a new technological revolution. Right now, 1,000 test pilots have launched themselves into a new digital frontier, a private network outside the big tech control. New technology with state-of-the-art digital engagement and never-done-before security and privacy features that are now operational. With Quick's digital engagement, entertainment, communication, and commercial exchange will never be the same. We are QUX. Quick's. Advanced pre-release sales are limited to 3,000. Order now by visiting quicks.tv. Get yours now before they sell out. Be part of a brand new online experience that you control.
For non-crimes. That's what Bragg did too. Bragg didn't even allege a crime. He still hasn't told us what the underlying crime is that Trump allegedly committed. You guys are back. I just remind you one more time. The judge who has gotten the case in District of Columbia is not only the toughest punisher of rioters, and the Post just goes right ahead and refers to the 2021 insurrection. Where's the proof that there's an insurrection? They've spent more money on this investigation, any investigation in American history, and they haven't indicted a single person for insurrection. They haven't proved insurrection, and they just go ahead and say it. And nobody had a gun. And they didn't kill anybody, even though they lied about it originally. The Capitol Police killed people. Ms. Boylan and, oh my goodness, 11 defendants that she put behind bars. I don't know how many of them she put behind bars for more time than the prosecutor recommended. I don't remember judges doing that. And here is just so you know that I'm not making this up. You can get a copy of this online. This is the report of Senator William Ligon and his committee, which lays out witnesses, not bull, but witnesses. And it mentions the witnesses and tells you their testimony, and they all. So if I read this, which I of course did, I studied it very carefully. I was at these hearings. Then why wouldn't I argue this for my client? If I didn't, then you should disbar me. It also concludes that our interpretation of the throwing out of the people at the State Farm Arena was correct, and that the state government played around with it. This is a crooked city, ladies and gentlemen. And haven't you learned enough about Ratzenberger lying to figure out you can't trust him? Look at all the look at all the evidence that he had that this was a highly questionable election, and he kept saying it was fine. Now, we also found out later on through a Freedom of Information Act request that this guy had a report from a group that he had assigned to take a look at the election beforehand. He had a report, and he hid it in his desk, of 48 irregularities in the election. I don't know if they're the same as these or different, but he certainly couldn't say it was a perfect election. He never investigated any of those. I mean, this guy's a real piece of work. So I don't see how this case doesn't get thrown out for failure to allege a crime. Failure to allege, and then how I would say they're not going to be able to prove that any of this was knowingly false. Well, before we go much further, let me take my Balance of Nature pills, which I recommend that you take and that you get. Go to balanceofnature.com, code Rudy. Balanceofnature.com, code Rudy. You get 35% off these. And if you get the travel size, you'll get $25 off, and you'll get an additional free very nice carrying case. I'm going to take the red one are the fruits. I always take 2 in the morning and 2 at night. You can take 1, or you can take 2, or you can take 4. Depends on how much you need, or how much you're actually eating of fruits and vegetables. I just had some vegetables, actually. Had some peas. One more. Oh, come on. Here we are. I like the color of these things too, Ted.
Yeah,
they're very I don't know, they're very crisp. They're like our deck over here.
They kind of are like our deck. It almost makes so much sense. The color combination.
Sometimes when you leave that on in the middle of the night,
it's not.
Come out and I look, I think it's a Christmas tree.
It's like, oh, is it already December? So, Mayor, we're going through, as you know, I've been going through your early podcast. We have a few clips that are prepared here. Maybe we'll wait till tomorrow night to really get into it. But let's of course get back to our Balance of Nature time, and after that we'll talk about some of this.
Well, you tell them a little about Balance of Nature while I put my take another little serving of fiber here.
Of course, Balance of Nature, a proud sponsor of the program. We recommend it for anyone. It doesn't matter what your age. Anybody that considers themselves active, you want some more energy, check out Balance of Nature. Go to balanceofnature.com. Use the promo code Rudy for, wow, they're giving you 35% off. Because of your support of the show, you have access to this. And look, they pack 31 fruits and vegetables into these pills, and you can discover why hundreds of thousands, dare I say millions, maybe not yet, but hundreds of thousands, they're on their way to millions of people who use this product. Balance of Nature's fruits and vegetables. You've probably seen their commercials, whether it's on Newsmax, Fox News, or elsewhere. And there's a reason so many people are turning to Balance of Nature for more energy and to just kind of complete their diet.
Look, I already look more energetic,
health conscious.
Right? Don't I?
100%, Mayor. And that's the thing.
You attest to the fact that I'm pretty energetic, right, Ted?
I can attest to your level of energy, Mayor. Really, almost.
So, no luck with choking right now.
No, we have luck. I'm going through it. I think it's one of those.
I just want one little piece, and let me tell you why this is significant. Archer, according to the renditions of his testimony, which we should be getting very soon, Archer said that in December of 2015, he was in, I think they were in France, and Zlochevsky was there and Pohorsky. Zlochevsky is the owner of Burisma, and I can't emphasize enough that he's an organized criminal, and he is suspected of wasting his partner, who suspiciously died shortly after he came back to the company. But in any event, whether he did that or not, he's one of the biggest crooks in Ukraine, which is saying a lot. And he's pro-Russian, pro Putin. And his company was being seized by the Poroshenko government. and the prosecutor general was a man named Victor Shokin. And basically, according to his testimony and the testimony of witnesses, now supported by Zlochevsky himself, as recounted to an FBI reliable source, Zlochevsky employed Joe Biden to fix the case for him because Joe Biden was named as the point man by Obama for Ukraine, and therefore he was the only one that could really tell the president of Ukraine what to do. The president of Ukraine didn't like Shokin very much. There were different political parties. The president of Ukraine was pro-Ukrainian. Shokin was, Zlochevsky was pro-Russian. And he had all intents of taking the company from him. And this guy was in a panic, and he needed a crook to help him. So he goes and he gets a guy from UK, a guy from Poland, and he knows what everybody knows, but the American press that covers up, he knows that Joe was a lifetime crook. This is exactly the kind of thing that his son and his brother were going around doing, well, for 30 years. So he makes a deal, and he describes it. I paid him in order to be available to protect my company. Then lo and behold, on February 1st or 2nd, I think it was like both days, Shokin, who they falsely say was corrupt and wasn't pursuing the case, which is disproven by the public facts, Shokin people raided the Burisma offices and closed them down. That's pretty effective, huh? They closed them down. That tells you we're coming after you, babes. Zlochevsky panicked, got Biden, and then you see, and this is again very, very dramatic and very, very damaging to Biden. Biden's on the phone with him in the next 10 days, 4 times for an hour on Poroshenko. Never at any time during his vice presidency is he on the phone with anybody that often. And Poroshenko is reporting to Shokin, who testified to this, about those calls and telling you what the calls were about. What the calls were about were that that Poroshenko better get rid of Shokin, because Shokin, won't be reasonable about Burisma, which is to drop the investigation. And then eventually he intimidates him. He extorts him by saying, you're not going to get your $1 billion that is required for the country to stay afloat. Since when Poroshenko took over, there was only 800 grand in the bank. I mean, the Ukrainians steal big time, and I don't mean to malign the people. It's like us. I mean, we got a crooked government too, so we can't be holier than thou, right? We got a damn crooked government, but the people aren't crooked. Ukrainian people are wonderful people. They happen to have one of the most corrupt governments in the world.
So, Mayor, let's play. Maybe first we'll play the vice president's words. He literally went on stage and bragged about this. So let's play that short clip, and then maybe we'll tease, because I was able to upload a little bit of your interview with Shokin. Was that 2020 or 2019 that interview took place? Maybe even 2018.
No, it was 20. Well, I did an interview. There are 2 interviews with him.
I'll show you the one.
The one that video was at the end of 2019. But I interviewed him for the first time in January 2019, and that's tape. That's audio, an audio recording.
Okay.
This was the video recording.
Also in 2019.
Yeah, but one was at the very beginning of 2019. Look, I had all this evidence. By not all of it, but most of it by February and March of 2019.
Wow. Well, let's play the first clip. You can wear those if you want.
I remember going over convincing our team, or others too, convincing us that we should be providing for loan guarantees. And I went over, I guess, the 12th, 13th time to Kyiv, and I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, no, I said, I'm not going to, we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, what, 6 hours? I looked, I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch. Got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid.
Back.
So here's another thing you should know, and we'll get you this recording too, which kind of puts another nail in Biden's coffin. Biden not only got Shokin fired, Biden approved the new prosecutor, who turned out not to be a lawyer. So they had a delay about a month for him to come on, because they had to do an exception, they had to change the law so he could come and fix the case.
And now the next clip, and we'll play more tomorrow night. I'm going to go through this whole thing with the mayor between tonight and tomorrow's show. But I just want to show a clip.
It's translated because
that's
Shokin actually could. Shokin actually could. I tried to encourage him to testify in English, but because he wanted to be precise, he is a lawyer after all. He wanted to be precise. He insisted on doing it through a translator.
So we just have a small clip, and
I did a pretty good job of breaking these here. And I wasn't even mad. Came in, and when you came into that office, there was already a case against Burisma. Is that correct?
Когда вы вступили в должность, дело Бурисма уже было в рассмотрении.
Да.
Yes.
And the case involved money laundering, abuse of power, some other. There were 5 or 6 cases. Isn't that correct? Mr. Shokin, it was not just one case. It was a number of cases.
Правда ли то, что там была на самом деле целая группа дел, которые можно категоризовать по некоторым направлениям?
Ну, дело в том, что там действительно было очень много дел, но эти дела...
The basic problem with Burisma...
investigative cases, but they were all concerning one company. That's why they were combined into one investigative
And just to simplify it, the basic problem with Burisma is that Mr. Zlochevsky, who owned it, had been a minister of the government.
Мы правильно понимаем, что основная проблема была в том, что господин Злочевский, который является владельцем, одновременно был министром в правительстве Украины.
Да, действительно, он был министром, и действительно, используя свое служебное положение, он получил...
In the cabinet of ministers, he illegally issued to himself 9.
So that's just the clip I got for now, Mayor.
That was very important testimony. That tells you what a massive crook Zlochevsky was, that Joe Biden allowed his delicate son, and I say delicate now, not being sarcastic, I say delicate because he had an addictive personality. So what Shokin just said, I don't know if you picked it up in the translation, is that while he was minister of the ecology, this crook Zlochevsky awarded himself all the oil properties. And he had moved his company to Cyprus, which is where they laundered money ultimately through. And his partner, who owned 51% of the company, ran the business, and he stole the leases. So the company is an illegitimate company. There are documents in the State Department that we've released that point out that Obama's State Department considered Burisma to be one of the most crooked companies in Ukraine, and was out of its mind that Hunter Biden went to work for them. Now, what the hell is Joe Biden doing letting him go work for them? And don't tell me you didn't know. That one got blown up with the hard drive because there's a meeting in the vice president's office with the number 2 guy at Burisma. And it's all documented. I have no idea why. I mean, I know how corrupt they are, but this has gone beyond anything reasonable now. We've got a major crook in the White House who is compromised by 3 governments that are very significant. 2 you could regard as adversaries, right? China, that wants to overtake us, and Russia. He got, I keep saying 31 million. You haven't seen all the proof at 31 million yet. You will. I'm kind of a little ahead of you. I think it's about 11 million that the Comer Committee has documented. So, but it's going to be 31 million. I feel very comfortable telling you that. About $31 million from China, and a whole string of decisions in China's favor and against the interest of the United States on the other side. Russia, he got 3.5 million from Ms. Baturina, who is a oligarch, a crook, and a close friend of Putin's, and she was left off the list of oligarchs who were given sanctions. That's a pretty good price for that, 3.5. And then of course you've got Ukraine, where he got paid for doing his job, getting the case fixed with the prosecutor he approved. Got rid of the prosecutor that he wanted to get, that wouldn't do it, and put in a prosecutor that did do it. And the proof is in the pudding. They did dismiss the case, even though the State Department has all kinds of records about what a crooked company Burisma is. Obama's own State Department. This stinks to up to the sky and back again. And it is disgraceful, and a matter of even maybe more concern than the actual crimes that Biden committed, that our government has become so corrupt that it lets this go by. And then they then the press lets them pull off this ridiculous indictment the day after Archer testifies, so that people won't talk about Biden's massive corruption. Well, they're not going to stop me from talking about it. I knew it before anyone. I shouldn't say I knew it before anyone. Several people knew it. Several people tried to get it out and they couldn't. I did. I just went right on television and got it out. By the way, the reason they lie about me, the reason they go after me, the reason that they pay for legal fees for people to sue me is because aside from Trump, I'm their second biggest enemy. You would not know about the Ukrainian bribe if it wasn't for me. You certainly wouldn't know about the hard drive if it wasn't for Bob Costello and me, my lawyer, my great lawyer. Think about it. Realize how much they hate me? When Biden first got in the campaign, he wrote a letter to the networks asking that they not interview me, which I took as a great compliment as to my skill.
Mayor, I've never heard of that. I didn't hear of that before, and I haven't heard of that since.
They made nothing of it. The press dealt with it as if that's kind of normal.
Par for the course, right? And of course.
Well, it is. It's par for their corrupt course. This has got.
You ever heard that?
If we want to be a great people and a great government again, we got to fix this. This is not political anymore. This is about the honor and the dignity and the integrity of the most important country on earth.
That's right, Mayor. It's not even partisan. It's not even about President Donald Trump at this point, right? It's about we can't allow the ruling regime to pick and choose who's eligible and who's not. They are persecuting They're the number one threat to their grasp on power. They're persecuting the one individual who can and is likely on path to upending the current regime. And this is what you see in I don't know, do we use the word third world countries or banana republics? This is not America,
I'd go
Mayor.
worse than that. I don't think it's banana republics. We're certainly not a banana. We're too rich to be a banana republic. This is what you saw in the Soviet Union. This is what you saw in Nazi Germany. And this is what you see right now in China. This is very, very high level corruption. This isn't, some little government with, 8 million people and a GDP, less than Baldwin, New York.
And so, Mayor, how important is it that we send a message, that the American people send a message, this isn't going to fly, right? I mean, our country's at stake.
I hope we can get beyond the partisan division.
It's not about
here.
Trump, right?
It is about Trump in a way, because he is the best situated to change this. I just don't think the other Republicans would understand it anywhere near as well, or have the intestinal fortitude that he has, which has me in our soccer time bring up the subject of Mike Pence, who has become something of a folk hero for the left-wing traitors. I know the real story about Mike Pence. And we could play the tape. We could play his change of position and and how he's being embraced by all the people that actually hate him, but now it sounds like he's becoming a rat. I mean, today, what he did today was disgraceful. He shouldn't even be allowed to appear with the Republican National Committee. One thing all Republicans should be united about. You don't have to be for Trump to be a Republican. You can be a Republican that's for somebody else. But if every Republican should be 1,000% against these indictments, because it can happen to them. I'll tell you what, if for some reason Trump were either to lose or were to drop out or whatever, and any one of these people became the candidate, they would do the same thing to them. In fact, you could see they were starting to do it to DeSantis when it looked like he had a chance. There were people saying he was worse than Trump. There were Democrats saying that DeSantis was worse than Trump. Now they're going back to Trump is the worst. Because but if the polls change, I mean, I don't know if these people fool themselves. Also, Pence,
Bingo.
They hated Pence.
Bingo.
They hated Pence.
Remember,
as a religious
zealot. When he was
yeah.
governor, right before he was vice president.
They hated him.
He was a whack job from Indiana.
Which is why I think he has his wife with him all the time. He's afraid of the press.
Well, do you think
I never saw a guy. I mean, I guess it's a great credit to them. They're very much in love, but I just never saw a guy. But it looks a little like she's his keeper. But today he condemned Trump for what he did in this case. I just read to you all these things about Georgia. You know, he would not even look at it. I tried very, very hard to get him to read this stuff. He wouldn't look at it. And when Barr says he investigated, he told the U.S. attorney in Georgia not to investigate. And they just buy it and they listen to him. I mean, and nobody asked the question, hey, why the hell were you sitting on the hard drive for a year? You let them impeach the president of the United States, and he had a perfect defense in the hard drive, and you never gave it to him. That's kind of the scummy stuff that Smith did in the case that got reversed.
But Mayor, how sad. No one was asking.
Barr pretends to be like his establishment lawyer. He's an establishment lawyer that withheld relevant evidence about a president of the United States.
Well,
he helped to foster the fraud that brought us Joe Biden.
Well, our audience is searching for a bridge to assist Mr. Barr with his promise. However, you know, some are concerned with the large displacement of water should Mr. Barr choose their bridge. So that is of concern.
Oh,
but
I
we're
don't
trying
want
to
him
get
to
that
jump
in writing.
the water.
Yeah.
I don't want him to jump in the water. What a jackass to say that.
Well, we don't. We wish him no harm, but why not? I want to see the man take a little jump. Just jump in the water. We'll have a boat ready to take him out. But I want him to follow through for once on something. I mean, this man.
Well, I
My
want the
goodness.
Answer. I want the answer to why he covered up the hard drive for a year.
Is it fear? Is it fear of the permanent Washington political class?
I mean, there's no excuse. There's certainly no excuse doing it during the impeachment. But there was no excuse at all when they started to use it aggressively and started accusing me and the president of being Russian agents. And he knew that it was validated by the FBI a year earlier. He knew that was not Russian. It was validated. It was John Mac Isaacs.
Doesn't the vice president, even if you're running against the president, even if he's running against the guy who made him relevant, by the way, even if you're running against him, doesn't he have an obligation to stand up to the lies on Russian collusion? They're calling him a trick. I mean, come on.
Look, he's desperate because what is he? He's in single digits.
Oh yeah, he
was the vice president. He's in single digits. DeSantis, Ramaswamy,
Christie's ahead of him.
No.
I think Christie's ahead of Pence.
No,
I know, Mayor. I know you don't want to admit that. You don't think so?
Well, I mean, it depends on the poll.
Yeah.
It depends on the poll. There are some polls.
I'm sorry. I don't want to admit it either. But
there are some polls where he's at.
I love that you hate Chris.
There are some polls where he's at 2%, some polls where he's at 3%. And there's a poll or two where he's at 7 or 8%.
Yeah.
There are polls where he's ahead of Christie. There are polls where Christie's ahead of him.
The point being, they're wallowing in the depths of.
I mean, I think Christie will eventually be ahead of him. I agree with you.
Yeah.
I don't think he is right now.
Okay.
But we're going to take a look. We might as well see the status of the campaign. Yeah, I'm really interested in seeing the polls this week, given the way they bombed Trump. The way they bombed Trump this week. I mean, is it going to affect him? I mean, I know it hasn't affected him and it's helped him, but I don't count on that always being. I mean, I've been in politics for too long to think there are any clear rules about it. I'm going to take a look and let you know, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, of course, it's
my wonderful audience.
And Mayor, of course, we've talked about this. Of course, the early indictments are. It seems to be helping the president, especially with getting the base to kind of rally around him. And the larger question is, in a general election, will enough voting Americans, see through these sham indictments? Or will the Democrat Party and their allies and the legacy media outlets successfully pull the wool over enough Americans' eyes, like we saw happen with COVID? And that is the question, Mayor. I am confident.
The last poll. Let's go. You want to go the Real Clear Politics average?
Let's see what
that includes the New York Times.
Hit us with it. Morning
Consult, Economist, Rasmussen, Harvard Harris, Monmouth, Quinnipiac, and Yahoo News. All those polls are in it. In those polls, the smallest margin that Trump has is 25%, and the largest one is 43%. For an average of, he's leading by 35.8%. Except the last three polls, 4 polls were ahead of that. So he's trending up. He's ahead by 35.8%. DeSantis in the average is 18.1%. The last 4 polls were 13, 18, 15, and 17. Number 3 is Ramaswamy at 5% average. But he's trending down a little. Pence is at 4.4%. Haley's at 3.4%. Scott is at 3.1%. Christie's at 2.5%. Burgum is below 1%. Hutchinson is below 1%. And Hurt is almost non-existent. He's at 0.3%. In fact, in a couple of polls, he's at 0. Christie's largest number in any poll is 5%, and his lowest number in a poll 3 ago, the Economist poll, was 1%. So, I mean, the only one who's showing a little bit of life is Ramaswamy right now. Pence's best showing was 7%, and he's got 7.
Yeah.
That was his best showing, and his usual number is about 3 or 4. He's a little bit ahead of Haley and Scott.
Nikki Haley's still in it, huh? Has she seen much movement in the what? I feel like she's been in this thing for 8 months now. She was the first to announce, wasn't she?
She's never been above 4%.
Never above 4, and she's been in it now for 5 months.
Yeah, and that same thing with Scott. He's never been above 4%. He's gone down.
And Tim Scott, some of the establishment, and I don't want to fault Tim Scott. The senator seems like a good man, but I always I start to get very wary of any candidate that the establishment media starts propping up, right? When I start hearing good things about Tim Scott from CNN, not faulting Tim Scott for this, and not just CNN, but some of these other outlets and online outlets, Mayor, I start to get suspicious.
Well, I don't know. You know, you can go back. I must have here 50 polls.
Amazing. The internet.
He's never been behind.
Trump? I don't think he's ever been behind.
He's never been behind. DeSantis, one poll.
Oh, yeah. A DeSantis commission poll.
In March. March, he was 2% ahead. CNN, well, you know, it's a phony poll.
Oh, see, but like you said, Mayor, that's when they built up DeSantis. First, they built him up, right, when Trump was the enemy, and then, and they wanted DeSantis. They wanted to build him up.
That was March 8th to March 12th, and he was at 2% ahead. And then Trump next poll was 14% ahead.
But DeSantis
now he's, as I said,
his campaign's doing enough damage.
In the 30s and 40s.
Media doesn't need to take down DeSantis. DeSantis is taking down DeSantis or his campaign. But you're right. There was a time when he was the media darling, and then you had Fox News and some of these big donors. Look, and I get it. They made a calculation, a poor one. I think their calculation was this is the guy. They thought some people thought this was the guy. And it wasn't even necessarily they hated Trump. Some of these guys, they just didn't think Trump could win. They didn't see a path for him.
He's made the mistake that Pence made in a couple of these in trying to use it as a way of going after Trump, but a little more delicately by kind of saying, well, I wouldn't do that kind of thing, but he shouldn't be indicted for it. It's not a crime. This last one, he was okay. I mean, he's basically, he said that,
who are we talking about?
Not Pence.
DeSantis?
DeSantis. And he was asked if he would pardon him, and he didn't commit to it, but he did use the Ford pardon of Nixon as a good thing.
You're being too kind, Mayor. You're being way
I'm not being too kind. I'm just reporting the facts. I mean, the facts are that Pence.
You're saying that his response was okay.
Pence and Haley have been the worst.
Sure. And Christie, of course.
Oh, Christie.
Yeah, but you don't even count. You don't count him.
Christie doesn't even count him. All he does is attack Trump. I don't even know what he's running on. I don't know if he's going to raise taxes, lower taxes. What is he going to do about? What is he going to do about Ukraine? What's he going to do about China?
Yeah, Chris Christie's our foreign policy expert.
He doesn't have time for that. He makes wisecracks about Trump and not even funny.
You're right. They're not funny, are they?
No.
It's funny. When I bring up Christie, it's like when you would bring up DeSantis previously to me, right? I know the response I'm going to get. It's just like an automatic, visceral response to Chris Christie.
It isn't really. I mean, it's just the fact that I don't think a guy can win running a campaign like that.
Well, that's the thing. And
not against somebody who's
but you see through it. You see the phoniness because you worked with Chris Christie up close. And this whole campaign, as you've said, it's a vanity. I don't even know if it's what it is.
About? I mean, I don't know. It'd be a real.
Hey, I'm not gonna.
Maybe
it's the elephant in the room. All right. So the elephant.
Maybe the elephant in the room.
Yeah. We don't need to say.
I like elephants. You leave elephants alone. They're the symbol of the Republican Party.
You're right. They've got nothing to do with it.
They got great memories, unlike Biden.
So with the president having a commanding lead, Mayor, what would your advice be to? And I guess your advice might be different depending on the candidate. Let's say for someone like Vivek. He's spoken very nicely about the president, and he's also said he's called out this ridiculous travesty of an indictment. What do they stay in this thing? At what point do they kind of bow out? I mean, I guess, and is the advice different for each of these candidates? Should we go through each one real quick before signing off?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to have a debate. They should. I mean, if they're in it this long, they should remain in it for the debate.
Nikki Haley's on the phone. Mayor, great to hear from you again. We talked a few times during the administration. What should I do?
Well, I don't know. Since you never broke over 4%, you know what you have to do. I mean, what are you going to get?
Okay, rapid fire.
If you doubled your best number, you'd be at 10. You'd be at 8%.
Okay, rapid fire. Tim Scott's on the phone. Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina. Mayor, great to talk to you. We've had great relationships. What should I do?
Endorse Trump right after the New Hampshire primaries and before South Carolina, and let Trump have a big win in South Carolina on the theory that we all should stand behind Trump now to defend the First Amendment.
Now it's your friend Vivek Ramaswamy, who you've had on WABC radio numerous times, and we had him for a podcast months ago. Mayor, good to talk to you again. What should I do this campaign?
Well, I think he's been a positive force. He's arguing policy, unlike Christie, who's arguing personality. He hasn't been harmful in the campaign to the Republican cause or the ability to beat Biden. And I don't know. I think he should stay in a little longer, because I don't think it'll happen, but there's a chance he could pass DeSantis. I wouldn't rule it out.
That's right. Well, let's keep the
right now, based on these numbers, even though it's a very remote possibility, the only one you could make an argument has a chance to defeat Trump is DeSantis.
Okay, Governor DeSantis, we've tried to get him on the show.
He's not going to do it. It's way.
What advice do you give DeSantis? How do I reboot this campaign, Mayor? I'm on day 13 of my reboot.
Reboot it again. I think you should reboot it again, but this time you should say something different. I mean, if you're going to reboot it, jerk, reboot it. Say something different. You're saying the same damn thing in the same boring way.
Okay.
Except you have a third less people working for you. The reboot is he's got a third less people working for him.
It's a third of the boot.
But he's still running based on, his whole campaign is what he's going to do about COVID. Did anybody tell him that COVID's over now?
Yeah. He's also got that fight with Mickey Mouse.
Oh, yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
He's got kids theme
I'm
park.
with him on that.
You're with him on that, yeah. Kids theme park, real tough guy, yeah.
If he beats the Mouse, Adams could make him rat czar in New York. He could go, and then he can work his way up.
Now, I don't know if you have any pull with Mayor Adams, but you may have some pull in New York City government still. Maybe you can help Governor DeSantis should this not work out. Maybe would you place a call for him?
He's first going to have to show that he can take on the Mouse before he can take on the rats.
Okay, so we'll watch this. We'll watch the ongoing.
I can't recommend him until he defeats the Mouse.
Who else?
The Mouse has come back and made a fight out of it. The only thing about the Mouse is the Mouse took like about a 20%, 30% hit to their profitability.
Yeah. Government.
Our conservative friends out there, which we consider ourselves involved with all of you, they're beginning to understand the power of the purse. I mean, look what they did to that stupid, disgusting yellow water that's called Bud Light.
Bud Light.
Don't want to tell you what it looks like.
Oh, we know what it looks like, and I always thought that even before this whole controversy.
I've occasionally I'll look at it and say, "Oh my God, I'm not going to have that." Oh, that's Bud Light.
Well, Mayor, we are well into soccer time. I don't want this to end. We're having such a good time. We hit most of the major candidates. I didn't ask you if Vice President Pence called what you'd tell him to do, but I'm afraid I think I might know the answer. Take a nice long.
Stop bullshitting, Pence. You know what you did, and you know what you could have done.
What is it?
Because you actually said you were going to do it 3 days before in a speech that they keep playing all the time on Newsmax. He said he was going to fight right down to the wire.
Yeah, real tough guy. What is, and the question for another time, but between DeSantis and Pence, I mean, President Donald Trump made these guys. Mike Pence he was going to be a 2-term governor of Indiana, and that's what he would have been forever, right? A 2-term governor who didn't like to bake cakes for gay couples. Something that would have been his epitaph, right?
Like what?
he didn't like to bake cakes
Oh,
for gay couples. He got
no.
into some silly controversy,
well,
right?
he had a constituent.
Yeah. Well, I think it was a liberal activist, right? It's one of those deals where the liberals, they sent their activists to these poor little mom and pop cake shops in these small towns in Indiana. But that's not the point. The point being, that was Mike Pence's legacy. He was going to be known as the guy, the one, maybe 2-term governor of Indiana who didn't like baking cakes for gay couples, right? And Trump makes him vice president of the United States, puts him on the ticket in what may be the greatest upset in the history of American presidential elections, going back to 1780, whenever the first election was. 88? 1788, Mayor, right? I'm accounting for Washington, who didn't have an opponent either time, correct?
Right.
So in 1788, Mike Pence,
Well, let's
President,
check.
so President Trump makes this guy, President Trump, and you know this because he had you, the best endorsement you can get in today's Republican Party outside of President Trump is Mayor Rudy Giuliani. And Mayor Giuliani, President Trump went down there and won that thing for Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis was going to lose. Not only was he going to lose to this Adam Putnam guy, the agriculture commissioner. He was down 20 points to the agriculture commissioner.
He was a congressman. No.
Okay, and a congressman.
He was a Ryan.
Yeah. Some guy that nobody knows anymore, right? No offense to Mr. Putnam. You get the point.
Will you stop it?
Sorry.
With DeSantis. I mean, until he became disloyal, he wasn't a bad guy. He was helpful. I mean, I recommended, and it wasn't me. Other people really had a lot more to do with it, but I put my 2 cents in favor of him as Trump's lawyer. I mean, I just said he's been very good to us, and he's been always 100% whenever we called upon him to do anything. And he seemed to get it that this was I mean, there was a whole group of them. Of course, Jordan was the star, but who got it that it was like Nunez and Gates, and they got it that this was a big fraud, that it wasn't just a misunderstanding, Russian collusion. It was a big fraud. It was an attempt to frame him that Hillary Clinton paid for. And why she's not in jail is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, it's just ridiculous. She paid money to frame a guy, and she paid money for a false report that almost removed a lawfully elected president on false pretenses.
It is absolutely absurd. Well,
the Democrats get away with, literally and figuratively, murder. Murder and the Clintons.
Well, Mayor, we're well into soccer time. So much to discuss. Tomorrow we'll have more from your interviews over in Ukraine. So you'll all want to come back 8:00 p.m. Eastern tomorrow.
1788. You know how I figured that out? I remember Jefferson was 1800, and Washington had 2 terms, and Adams had 1. So you had to go back 12 years to 1788. I always get confused whether it was 1788 or 1790. But if you remember that our first really disputed election was in 1800, when Jefferson and Burr tied, even though they had an agreement that Burr would step aside and be vice president. They sort of campaigned with each other because in those days, before the change, the number 1 vote getter became president, and number 2 became vice president.
Yeah, that's funny.
And Jefferson had lost narrowly in 1796 to Adams. He was Adams' vice president. And that's when the 2 of them really split up and became angry at each other, only to be reunited largely, maybe about 10 years after they were out of the White House. And then they had one of the great correspondents in American history, back and forth. And of course, the very touching fact that they both died on July 4th. And they died within a couple hours of each other. And Jefferson really died first, but Adams didn't know that because they didn't have telephone. Yeah. And he said almost like he felt good for the country Well, Adams said, and Jefferson still lives.
Yeah.
Of course, Jefferson had already died.
Okay. Wow.
But they both died on July 4th. And of course, you know, they are the most prominent architects of the Declaration of Independence. Adams fought the battle to get it passed, and Jefferson and Adams, who was not a modest man, overcame his lack of modesty and said, Jefferson's a better writer. You write it. Then he edited it like crazy.
Yeah.
And drove Jefferson crazy. You know, it's really a shame what they do to Jefferson. He's a great man. He was one of my heroes. I read as a young man, I read the entire Dumas Malone 5-volume biography of Jefferson, which is a definitive work on his life. It's one of the best presidential biographies. It's long as hell. It's 5 books, but it's beautifully written, tremendously well researched. The author is Dumas Malone. And I mean, it's pretty hard to find the time nowadays, I guess, to read a 5-volume work, but I did read that, and I put that right near the top of presidential biographies, except it's so damn long. But you really get an idea of the brilliance of the man. And of course, I guess one of the great tributes to him was John F. Kennedy, when he had one of his first cabinet meetings in the cabinet room. And, you know, he was being praised for bringing together the best and the brightest, you know, very, 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 maybe overdone, because, again, he was a Democrat and he replaced Eisenhower, and they wanted to make Eisenhower appear to be kind of, you know, not as intellectual or whatever. And they praised the intellect of the Kennedy cabinet. And Kennedy said, there hasn't been this much brain power in this room since Thomas Jefferson sat here all alone. Pretty good comment, huh? So, ladies and gentlemen, this is a great country. It's being disgraced right now by, I mean, it's amazing that you all and I have to live through the worst president in American history. And we've got 2 areas where we need strong, independent leadership, putting America first. And that's with regard to Ukraine and with regard to China. And those are one of the 2 places he's most compromised. So, and the way they get away with this, changing the subject, and you change the subject, you indict a man for non-crimes or crimes he didn't commit. That's really intolerable, no matter who you are. And I just really like to spend one show at some point to get a really good psychiatrist to explain Trump derangement syndrome to me, because I don't know how you can possibly say that that Trump is the worst thing for America when you got Biden. He's a better man than Biden. On every count, he's a better man. He's not a thief. For whatever mistakes or things that he says that are wrong, I don't think Biden ever tells the truth. And look at, I mean, you tell a lot about a man, what kind of father he is. Biden's evil. What he did to that granddaughter is irreparable. And no good man would do that. And now he recognizes her because the polls are killing him. That's why you recognize it. That's why you say, I have 7 grandchildren, not just 6. At Christmas, you don't even put out her stocking. Your wife only puts out stockings for 6. I wonder if Jill knocked you around when you did that. You think there's elder abuse there?
Probably a little bit of that.
I mean, I'm telling you, I didn't like what I saw when he was leaving the beach, not this time, the time before, where she paid no attention to him. I mean, it looks like she's basically farmed out the care and feeding of Senile Joe to whoever that woman is that follows right behind him.
Quite something, Mayor.
Well,
something. What's
we
in
are-
store tomorrow? What do we have going on here?
Well,
Another busy day.
tomorrow we're going to organize our Shokin stuff so you can hear the testimony, and maybe we'll pull out the extraordinary fact and prove it to you that Biden approved the prosecutor who ultimately fixed the case. So I don't know. He got him fired, he said, because the guy was corrupt. What the hell would Biden care if the guy was corrupt or not? Whatever Shokin, if Shokin was corrupt or not, he's a lot less. He was a lot less corrupt than Joe Biden. Jesus, I've met Shokin. You take a look. They saw him, right? People tonight saw him, right? When I was interviewing him, right? That guy looks like. Let me tell you what a Ukrainian oligarch looks like. First of all, they don't hide their wealth. They got jewelry coming out of their nose. I mean, that guy who had a simple sweater on, he has a simple home. He sure as heck was not very good at being corrupt, if he was. And the whole idea that he wasn't investigating Burisma is totally belied by the fact, and the press just ignores it, that he served a warrant closing them down on February 1st, 2016. So we'll be back tomorrow night. You can get us tomorrow on WABCRadio.com. You can also come back here at 8 o'clock tomorrow night. And I don't know what you watch us on, Twitter. That's where we have the most. But we also have a good, strong audience on YouTube and on Getter. Thank you, Getter. And on Facebook and on Twitch. What am I missing?
YouTube, Twitter, Getter, Facebook, Rumble.
The Rumble. I forgot Rumble. So don't forget my pillows. Don't forget mypillows.com/Rudy. No, not just pillows. Great sheets, great slippers, robes, and a guy who's fought like hell to help preserve our way of life and our country. He deserves your support. And you do code Rudy, you support both of us. Okay? Thank you. We'll see you tomorrow night. God bless the United States of America. Our purpose to bring to bear the principle of common sense and rational discussion to the issues of our day. America was created at a time of great turmoil, tremendous disagreements, anger, hatred. There was a book written in 1776 that guided much of the discipline of thinking that brought to us the discovery of our freedoms, of our God-given freedoms. It was Thomas Paine's Common Sense, written in 1776, one of the first American bestsellers, in which Thomas Paine explained, by rational principles, the reason why these small colonies felt the necessity to separate from the Kingdom of Great Britain and the King of England. He explained their inherent desire for liberty, for freedom, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, the ability to select the people who govern them. And he explained it in ways that were understandable to all the people, not just the elite. Because the desire for freedom is universal. The desire for freedom adheres in the human mind, and it is part of the human soul. This is exactly the time we should consult our history. Look at what we've done in the past and see if we can't use it to help us now. We understand that our founders created the greatest country in the history of the world, the greatest democracy, the freest country, a country that has taken more people out of poverty than any country ever. All of us are so fortunate to be Americans. But a great deal of the reason for America's constant ability to self-improve is because we're able to reason, we're able to talk, we're able to analyze. We are able to apply